The land Achilles had nurtured into a flourishing realm stood as a monument to his vision. Nestled in the rugged northern territories, his people, called the Vikinger, had grown into a nation of warriors and seafarers. Their longships cut through the icy waves, their halls rang with tales of bravery. Their shield walls stood unbreakable, a testament to the discipline and honor Achilles had instilled. Under his divine guidance, the Vikinger had transformed from scattered tribes into a unified force. Their strength radiated like a beacon across the seas, but such prosperity did not go unnoticed. In the shadowed fringes of the world, tribes bound to Ares watched with growing malice. To them, the Vikinger were not a symbol of resilience, but an insult. A people who thrived without bowing to chaos and bloodshed, Ares revered. These tribes, their blades forged in the fires of divine wrath, whispered of vengeance. Their resentment stoked by the god who sat brooding on Olympus. Ares had long despised Achilles. During the Trojan War, the mortal hero had defied him, rejecting the mindless slaughter Ares craved in favor of a warrior's honor. Now, as a god, Achilles had crafted a nation that embodied controlled strength and unity, ideals that stood in stark opposition to Ares' savage dominion. From his throne, Ares gazed upon the Vikinger with a fury that burned hotter than the forges of Hephaestus. They were a living rebuke to his power, a reminder of his inability to bend Achilles to his will. He resolved to crush them, to tear down everything Achilles had built, and to prove that war, his war, reigned supreme. The conflict began subtly, like the first ripples of a tempest. Raids struck the Vikingers' outer settlements, swift, brutal attacks by tribes wielding weapons that glowed with an unnatural light. The Vikinger met these assaults with ferocity, their axes and shields turning back the invaders time and again. But the raids intensified, the attackers growing bolder and more numerous, their strikes guided by a rage that transcended mortal limits. Villages burned, their smoke curling into the sky like a dark omen. Standing atop the windswept cliffs of his homeland, Achilles surveyed the horizon. His golden eyes narrowing as he traced the plumes of destruction. This was no ordinary war. This was Ares' doing. His hands tightened into fists, the divine energy within him surging like a tide. He had faced trials before, Eryx's crushing fists, the oracle's cryptic warnings, the grueling ascent to godhood. But this was a threat unlike any other. Ares did not seek merely to challenge him. He sought to annihilate the Vikinger, to erase the legacy Achilles had forged. That he could not abide. Turning to his people, their faces hardened with resolve, he raised his voice above the howling wind. "This ends now," he declared. "For you, for our home, I will face Ares himself and put an end to his wrath." The Vikinger roared their approval, their trust in him absolute. Their cheers echoed across the cliffs, a sound of defiance and hope. Yet Achilles knew this battle would not be fought on their shores, amidst the crashing waves and rolling hills. It would unfold on Olympus, in the realm of the gods, where the fate of his people hung in the balance. The ascent to Olympus. Achilles stepped into the divine realm, his form shimmering as he crossed the threshold between mortal earth and the eternal heights of Olympus. The mountain loomed before him, its peaks piercing the heavens, its air thick with the raw power of the gods. The grand hall of Olympus rose like a citadel, its marble columns gleaming under a sky that swirled with ethereal light. He strode forward, his armor, forged by Hephaestus and blessed by Athena, clinking softly with each step, and issued his challenge. "Ares!" His voice rang out sharp and unyielding, cutting through the murmurs of the Olympians. "You who thrive on chaos and feast on bloodshed, I call you forth. Face me in single combat before the eyes of the gods, and let us end this feud once and for all." The massive doors of the hall groaned open, and Ares emerged, a figure of menace and might. His armor was black as midnight, etched with crimson runes that pulsed with heat. His eyes blazed like twin pyres, and a cruel smile twisted his lips. "You, Achilles?" he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "A mortal turned god, barely weaned from the cradle of divinity, dares to challenge me. I am war incarnate, boy. You are nothing. "I am enough," Achilles replied, his tone calm but resolute. "Your hatred has scorched the earth below, threatening those I swore to protect. I will not stand idle while you wage your petty vendetta. Fight me, Ares, or slink back to your throne and let all know you fear a mere mortal." Ares threw back his head and laughed, a harsh, grating sound that shook the stones beneath their feet.
"Bold words, Achilles. Let's see if your spear matches your tongue. I'll grind your pride into dust and scatter your precious Vikinger to the winds."
The Olympians gathered, their forms materializing around an arena that sprang into existence at the heart of Olympus. A vast circle of polished stone framed by a sky alive with shifting colors. Zeus, enthroned above them all, raised a hand, his presence silencing the assembly. "This duel shall be fought with honor," he intoned, his voice a rumble of thunder. "The victor claims the right to shape the destiny of the mortal lands below." Achilles met Zeus's gaze and nodded, then turned to face Ares. He felt the weight of the Vikingers' faith pressing upon him, their courage, their unity, their unwavering spirit. He was no longer just the warrior who had wept over Patroclus's body. He was their god, their shield against the storm. Failure was not an option. The clash of titans. The arena trembled as the battle began. Ares struck first, conjuring a spear of searing flame and launching it with the speed of a comet. Achilles raised his shield, the divine metal forged by Hephaestus absorbing the blow, but the impact drove him back, his boots carving furrows in the stone. Ares advanced, relentless, his movements a whirlwind of fury and precision. In one hand he wielded a jagged sword that crackled with energy. In the other, a whip of lightning lashed out, each strike a thunderclap that split the air. Achilles countered with his spear, its tip a blur of silver as he parried and thrust. He had faced countless enemies, men, beasts, even gods, but Ares was a force unto himself. His power was primal, unrestrained, a tempest of destruction given form. Each blow carried the weight of mountains, each swing a promise of annihilation. Yet Achilles stood firm, his mind racing as he searched for a weakness. Ares might outmatch him in raw strength, but brute force alone did not win wars. He drew on memories of Troy, the lessons of strategy learned in the shadow of Patroclus's death. He recalled the Vikingers' shield walls, their disciplined resolve turning chaos into order. Ares fought with rage, a wildfire consuming all in its path, but Achilles fought with purpose, a river carving its course through stone. Ducking beneath the sweeping arc of Ares' sword, he lunged, his spear grazing the god's thigh. Golden ichor seeped from the wound, and Ares roared, his fury redoubling. "A scratch?" Ares bellowed, his voice shaking the arena. "You think that will fell me?" He thrust out his hands, and a vortex of fire erupted, engulfing the battlefield. Flames roared around Achilles, singeing his armor and blistering his skin. But he pressed forward, his divine essence shielding him from mortal harm. Drawing Apollo's bow from his back, he loosed a volley of arrows, each one aimed at the chinks in Ares' armor. The joints, the neck, the gaps where divinity met vulnerability. The arrows struck, drawing more ichor, but Ares shrugged them off, his wounds closing with infuriating speed. Achilles gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his brow. This was no battle of attrition. Ares' stamina seemed boundless. To win, he would need to outmaneuver the god, to turn Ares' own fury into his downfall. The turning point. Hours passed, or perhaps mere moments, for time bent strangely in the divine realm. The arena lay scarred, its surface cratered and blackened, the sky above churning with storm clouds summoned by the gods' clash. Achilles' muscles ached, his divine energy flickering under the relentless barrage, but surrender was a word he did not know. He had stared into the abyss before, had clawed his way from mortality to immortality, and he would not yield now. Not with the Vikingers' fate hanging in the balance. He shifted tactics, feigning fatigue, his steps slowing as if the battle had drained him. Ares, sensing victory, grinned wickedly and charged, raising his sword for a killing blow. The blade descended, a streak of death aimed at Achilles' heart. At the last instant, Achilles sidestepped, the sword slamming into the ground with a force that shattered the stone into dust. Seizing the moment, Achilles drove his spear into Ares' shoulder, the tip piercing through armor and sinking deep into divine flesh. Ares howled, stumbling back, his sword clattering from his grip. Achilles pressed his advantage, his strike swift and surgical. He thrust again, this time at Ares' knee, forcing the god to the ground with a crash that shook the arena. Ares retaliated, summoning a blast of raw energy that tore through the air. But Achilles raised his shield, deflecting it in a burst of light that reverberated through his frame. "You fight with anger," Achilles said, his voice steady amid the chaos. "But anger clouds your sight. It weakens you." Ares glared up at him, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with defiance. "You know nothing of war, Achilles. You're a child playing at power, a shadow of what I am." "No," Achilles countered, his spear hovering at Ares' throat. "I am a god shaped by loss, strengthened by those I defend. You wage war for your own glory. I fight for theirs." With a final resolute thrust, Achilles plunged his spear into Ares' chest, stopping just short of his heart. The god of war gasped, his power faltering, his body trembling beneath the weight of defeat. "Yield," Achilles commanded, his gaze unflinching. Ares' lips curled in a snarl, his pride warring with the agony coursing through him. He glanced at Zeus, who observed from his throne with an impassive stare, then back at Achilles. "I yield," he spat, the words bitter as venom. The arena stilled, the storm clouds parting, the flames dying to embers. Achilles withdrew his spear, and Ares slumped forward, beaten but alive. The verdict of the gods. Zeus rose, his silhouette towering over the assembly, his voice rolling like the tide. "Achilles has triumphed," he proclaimed. "By the laws of this duel, he holds the right to decree the fate of the mortal lands." Achilles stepped forward, his armor streaked with soot and ichor, his eyes sweeping over the gathered Olympians. "I ask only for peace," he said. "Let the tribes loyal to Ares stand down. Let the Vikinger live free from the shadow of divine vengeance." Zeus inclined his head, a rare glint of approval in his storm-grey eyes. "It is granted. Ares, you are bound by your defeat. Your followers will cease their raids, and you will honor Achilles' dominion." Ares struggled to his feet, his glare fixed on Achilles, a promise of retribution simmering beneath the surface. "This changes nothing," he hissed. "War endures, Achilles. You cannot outrun it." "Perhaps not," Achilles replied, meeting his gaze without fear. "But I will meet it with honor, not havoc." Zeus raised his hand, and the arena faded, Olympus returning to its tranquil splendor. The gods dispersed, their whispers carrying a newfound respect for the warrior who had humbled the god of war. A hero's return. Achilles descended to the mortal realm, materializing on the cliffs where he had sworn his oath. The Vikinger awaited him, their faces alight with hope and trepidation. "It is finished," he announced, his voice resonant with triumph. "Ares is defeated. Our lands are safe." The response was a thunderous cheer, a wave of sound that crashed against the cliffs and rolled out to sea. The Vikinger surged forward, embracing one another, their laughter and tears mingling in a celebration of survival and victory. They had not merely endured, they had prevailed, their god standing as their unwavering shield. In the days that followed, Achilles walked among them, joining in their feasts and listening to their songs. He had journeyed far from the broken man who had once sought vengeance beneath Troy's walls. Now, he was a god of purpose, a guardian whose strength lay not in destruction, but in protection. A great hall rose in his honor, its walls carved with scenes of his battles, from the plains of Troy to the heights of Olympus, a monument to his legacy. On Olympus, his name echoed with reverence, his place among the gods unassailable. He had faced his greatest foe and emerged victorious, not for glory, but for the Vikinger who carried his spirit forward. Their unity, their resilience, their courage, these were his true triumphs. Achilles, once a mortal bound by fate, now stood as an immortal forged by choice. A legend whose story had transcended the ages, from the ashes of war to the eternal light of peace.